Week number 4 of the 2025 fantasy football season is already underway, and we are less than 24 hours away from kickoff on Sunday. In today's video, I'm going to be helping you guys set your fantasy football lineups, breaking down my top 20 quarterbacks, as well as tight end rankings and tiers for week number 4 of the 2025 fantasy football season. If you guys are new to my channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 4 quarterback and tight end rankings and tiers for the 2025 fantasy football season. We begin with my must-start quarterback ones with my quarterbacks 1 through 2, Lamar Jackson as well as Josh Allen. Now, regardless of the matchup for these two guys, they are just always going to be inside of the top tier. There's a reason why you pulled the trigger either in the second or the third round on these guys, and that is because you want them in your lineup every single week because essentially they are matchup proof. Now, we got Lamar as my QB1 going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, in terms of a matchup, this is slightly below average for a quarterback, but when it comes to Lamar Jackson, you're not going to worry about that at all. 3 straight finishes inside of the top 4 and going up against the Chiefs in what could end up being the highest scoring game of the week. You have to feel incredible about Lamar Jackson. At number 2 is Josh Allen. Of the no one circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills going up against the New Orleans Saints. Now, deep down, I do have my worries about this matchup, not because I think the Saints defense is going to absolutely lock down the passing attack of the Buffalo Bills, because the Saints defense really isn't all that great, and they allow the 10th most points to the quarterback position. My biggest worry here is that the Buffalo Bills are up by so much that Josh Allen doesn't really have to do much, which was the case in week 2 up against the Jets, where he was the quarterback 25. Outside of that, though, the quarterback 1 and the quarterback 5, though you gotta understand that even if the Buffalo Bills are beating down on the New Orleans Saints, it's probably because Josh Allen at least did good enough to have a solid day early on. So while I do have at least some worries, I think ultimately you just got to play Josh Allen. Moving now into the second tier, which is going to be the mid-range must-start quarterback ones, we got Jalen Hurts, Caleb Williams, Patrick Mahomes, Daniel Jones, Justin Herbert, the pervert, Draco May, Jordan Love Me Tender, Love Me Sweet, as well as Bo Nix. Now, Jalen Hurts going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is a very exciting matchup. I wish the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive line wasn't absolutely demolished, because then this could end up being the highest scoring game of the week. But even so, without the offensive line of the Buccaneers, we could end up seeing this one end up being a shootout. Now, in terms of matchup for Jalen Hurts, this is a top 10 matchup for quarterbacks on a per game basis. Outside of week number 2, where the offense really didn't have to do much up against the Kansas City Chiefs. In Kansas City, Jalen Hurts was the QB 8 up against the Cowboys, quarterback 2 last week up against the LA Rams. So at this point in the season, if you wanted to honestly bump Jalen Hurts into that tier with Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, I'm not going to argue with you a ton, but I do believe that there is a little bit of a gap between the two, so that is why I have him at the beginning of tier number 2. At number 4, we got Caleb Williams going up against the Las Vegas Raiders in Viva Las Vegas. Now, Caleb Williams, there's a lot to be said about Caleb Williams. There's a lot to be said about how in a lot of these games, you kind of feel like there's still some meat left on the bone, where maybe Caleb Williams probably could have played better. Last week, he absolutely ripped the Dallas Cowboys defense a new one. It is important to note that basically any quarterback with a heartbeat can absolutely demolish that Dallas Cowboys defense, though in a matchup up against the Las Vegas Raiders that I really do like, it is a above average matchup for the quarterback position. I think Caleb Williams will continue to be a reliable top 12 option, and if Geno Smith and that offense are able to wake up like they did in the second half up against the Washington Commanders, then based upon how the Bears defense has looked, I do think this could end up being a higher scoring game. At number 5, we got Pat Mahomes going up against the Baltimore Ravens at home in Kansas City. Now, last week up against the Giants, the Chiefs basically just coast to victory, and Patrick Mahomes finishes as the quarterback 20. He doesn't have to do too much, so he doesn't do too much. Week 1, week 2, he is the top 6 quarterback. So this week up against the Ravens in a matchup that's not going to be a blowout, more than likely, in a game that's going to be a close contest, in a game that is going to be high scoring. You gotta love Patrick Mahomes to bounce back in this spot. At number 6, we got Daniel Jones, Indiana Jones himself, going up against the LA Rams. We did just see Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles offense put the LA Rams defense on a t-shirt. Can Danny Dimes do the exact same thing? 3 straight top 11 finishes. Say what you want about Daniel Jones. Say what you want about how they're gonna fall off. This is not repeatable for Daniel Jones to continue to play this great. This is a slightly below average matchup for a quarterback. Daniel Jones has proven to us that he is a safe asset in fantasy football. The offensive line is incredible. The weapons around him are very solid. He has a very reliable running back in Jonathan Taylor, and this game is projected to be the highest scoring game of the week according to Vegas totals. So while it always kind of deep down will feel gross to play Daniel Jones, because you probably know the inevitable is coming, which is Daniel Jones shits down his leg and throws a pick or two, and maybe even is running. I just kept running, Forrest Gump style, and then fumbles the ball, and it's a disaster. I get that game may eventually be coming, but based on what we have seen right now, Daniel Jones deserves to be ranked as a mid-range quarterback 1. Next up, we got Justin Herbert, the pervert, going up against the New York Football Giants in MetLife. My hope is that Jackson Dart brings that extra pizzazz to the Giants offense, and this one isn't just a complete and utter Cleveland steamering by the LA Chargers. And the reason why I don't want it to be that way is because if the Chargers are just in the driver's seat the whole time and Herbert doesn't throw 2 touchdowns to start off the game, this could end up being kind of like, Josh Allen up against the Jets or Patrick Mahomes last week up against the Giants. But ultimately, though, with how much the LA Chargers have tried to throw the ball early on in the season, with how good Quentin Johnston as well as Keenan Allen have looked, Justin Herbert at this point, I get. The matchup is great on paper. There are still some worries, though, because, again, this could end up being a straight-up butt-fucking by the Chargers, but Justin Herbert deserves to be ranked here. Next up, we got Draco, the Iceman May, quarterback of the New England Patriots, going up against the Carolina Panthers at home in Foxborough. Top 18 quarterback in 3 straight games, top 7 quarterback in back-to-back games. Now, the Carolina Panthers defense did end up having the Atlanta Falcons defense and offense locked up, and they threw away the key. The defense of the Falcons didn't do jack shit. The offense of the Falcons didn't score a single point. So the Carolina Panthers are riding high, right? And in terms of points allowed on a per-game basis to the quarterback position, the Carolina Panthers ranked 32nd. So this will be, at least on paper, a tough test for Drake May, but the NFL isn't played on paper. It's played on the fucking football field. And with how hot Drake May has ran as of the start of this season, and again, I think the Carolina Panthers early run's a little bit fugazi based upon the matchups. I think Drake May is going to be just fine. Next up, we got Jordan Love Me Tender, Love Me Sweet of the Green Bay Packers going up against the Dallas Cowboys in Jerry's World. Now, Jordan Love so far this season has just done exactly what he has needed to do to win games. When you have an exquisite defense like the Green Bay Packers, Jordan Love doesn't need to whip his cock out, swing it around, and throw for 3 touchdowns, 400 yards to win a football game. All he needs to do is not turn the ball over, throw 2 touchdowns, 250 yards, bada bing, bada boom, and you get out of there with the W. Now, this is not very good for fantasy, but it is good for the Packers. Now, they did just end up taking a fat L to the Cleveland Browns, which was a complete and utter disaster and probably sounded a million alarms in the head of Green Bay Packers fans. Ultimately, though, I'm not going to worry, and this does feel like the kind of matchup where Jordan Love does go absolutely crazy because the Dallas Cowboys defense is straight up Swiss cheese. They are the best matchup for a quarterback. So while Jordan Love hasn't done a crazy amount of greatness for fantasy football through the first 3 games of the season, he has been reliable outside of last week up against the Cleveland Browns, and I think he has his best game yet this week. At number 10, we got Bo Nix going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, my worry about Bo Nix is the same exact worry I have about Josh Allen, the same exact worry I have about Justin Herbert the pervert, and that is when the game ends up being a beatdown, when you're going up against the Cincinnati Bengals Bengals defense that just got sliced and diced its way through Fruit Ninja style by Carson Wentz and the Minnesota Vikings, when the Denver Broncos offense, when it plays very well, is a very good offense at the National Football League level. This could be a game where they're beating down on the Bengals. Jake Browning can't do diddly squat because the Denver Broncos have a good defense, and they kind of just cruise their way to a win, and Bo Nix ends up as like the quarterback 18. But early on, up against a defense that is as bad as the Cincinnati Bengals, I think Bo Nix will put up enough points early on for you to feel good about his finish, even if he's kind of just not doing much in the second half of the game. Now we move on into the third tier here, which is going to be my low-end quarterback ones. Now, a lot of people always ask me, Nick, how is it possible that your low-end quarterback ones technically include too many players through the first start of the list? How is this possible? There's technically 12 players that should be quarterback ones, but you include more than that. And the reason why I do that is because it's all about a feeling. It's not all about technically having them ranked inside of the top 12, because then I wouldn't include all the guys in tier 3, Baker, Justin Fields, Jared Goff, Brock Purdy, Geno Smith, when I feel very similarly about all of them. I'm not just going to cut it at 12 and leave Geno, Brock Purdy, and Jared Goff out of this tier just because they technically won't crack the actual top 12 of my rankings when I feel like they should be in a similar range. And that is why I do that. That is why throughout the summer, you will hear tons of fantasy analysts be like, oh, that's a top 12 running back for me. And by the time you listen to the whole video, they've talked about 16 different guys as a top 12 running back. It's because you have that feeling about them. Hopefully that makes sense. If you would prefer it to just be, oh, Nick, you got to cut it off at 12, I could do that, but I just don't think that's as genuine of a take. So Baker Mayfield going up against the Eagles, he is expected to play with a bicep injury. The offensive line could end up being the really bad part of this game for Baker Mayfield. He may be running around like a chicken with his head cut off, running around like a chicken that's being chased by Rocky, trying to train for one of his fights. Now, Baker Mayfield has looked good even with the O-line injuries. He looked great last week up against the Jets as the quarterback number 8, but I do definitely think his floor is now a little bit lower. Same thing is the case with the ceiling, because not only is the offensive line hurt, they also don't have Mike Evans. So this definitely isn't the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at their full strength. The Eagles defense is very good. Up against the quarterback position, they rank as the defense number 22. So it's not necessarily the worst matchup, but again, when your offensive line is as banged up to shit as Baker Mayfield's Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive line, that is what ultimately made me drop him down a tier. Next up, we got Justin Fields going up against the Miami Dolphins in the Miami Gardens. Dale 305. Now, Justin Fields, when you put him into your lineup, it gives you that type of icky feeling, right? You know how chicks say, oh, it's an ick when a guy does this, right? That's the kind of feeling I have when Justin Fields is in my lineup, because I know Justin Fields is either going to go balls to the wall, hand out knuckle sandwiches a la carte all game long, be the reason why you win your matchup because he scores 30 fucking points like he did week 1 up against Pittsburgh, or it's a complete and utter disaster like up against the Buffalo Bills. Nick, he got a concussion, he got hurt, he didn't play the whole game. I know he sure probably would have scored like 12 points by the end of the game, but he scored 4 points in week number 2. So it's either really all good or all bad for Justin Fields. You typically don't get that mid performance. This week up against the Dolphins, though, would be the rare mid performance, at least because the Dolphins defense reeks to high heaven. I think we are going to struggle mightily wrapping up Justin Fields. I think he is going to run all over this defense, so Justin Fields deserves to be ranked this high. At number 13, we got the Goffinator, Jared Goff, going up against the Cleveland Browns. So far this season, not so good up against the Packers. Very nice, I like, up against the Chicago Bears. And then not so hot up against the Baltimore Ravens in terms of fantasy finish. He did, though, look good in all 3 of those games, especially the last 2 games. Before we talk about Jared Goff some more, though, and the rest of the quarterbacks, as well as the tight ends in today's video, I would like to give you guys a quick word for our friends and our partner over at Underdog. If you're brand new to Underdog, it's sign up using promo code Notorious, or by clicking on the link in the video description, you'll receive a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus funds. You'll also receive a free pick. Plus, if you play $5 in the pick'em, you receive an additional $100 of bonus funds. So make sure you guys do check that out. Promo code Notorious, or by clicking on the link in the video description. If you don't know how the pick'em works, it's incredibly simple. You make at least 2 picks, the higher or the lower. If all of your picks hit, you get paid. The higher amount of picks that you take, if instead of taking 2, you take 3, 4, 5, then the payout does increase. So make sure you guys do check that out. Promo code Notorious, or by clicking on the link in the video description. Now, Jared Goff, to me, is kind of in that talking point of like the other quarterbacks, where we're talking about Herbert or Josh Allen, or who else do we talk about as that kind of a guy? Bo Nix, right? Where, hey, the game might get out of hand early and you don't end up seeing Jared Goff play as well. But if I know one thing about Dan Campbell, and that is that if they are beating down on the Cleveland Browns, they're not going to, let the Browns tap out, yell uncle, right? They're going to keep throwing those hammer fists into the fucking corpse of what would be the Cleveland Browns defense. Jared Goff, ultimately this season, it appears that he doesn't actually need to throw 3+ touchdowns for them to win. They could just use the rushing attack of Mr. David Montgomery, as well as Jahmyr Gibbs, Sonic and Knuckles, to win games. But maybe this week we see a better performance out of Jared Goff. I still do believe he is start-worthy and deserves the claim of being a top 12 guy. Now, again, if we're in the top 12 conversation, right? If this continues to be a trend, right? More than a 3-game small sample size, then we will start to truly panic. Next up, we got Big Cock Brock Purdy going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars at home in San Fran. Will return with the toe injury on Sunday. Going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars in Duval. Even though the game's not in Duval, I just love yelling Duval. The game is in Santa Clara. This is a matchup that is just the average. They are allowing the quarterbacks the 18th most points. So I am somewhat excited about Brock Purdy here. The Jaguars defense has been better than expected. Brock Purdy should be able to be that top 16-ish guy that you feel very reliable about week in and week out. This is just another team that is dealing with roughly 7,000 injuries. I don't know what is wrong with the medical staff in San Francisco, but those motherfuckers always get hurt. Final guy here is going to be Geno Smith of the Las Vegas Raiders going up against the Chicago Bears in Viva Las Vegas in terms of a matchup. Going up against the Bears, this is a top 3 matchup for the quarterback position. Now, if you watched last week's game and you had Geno Smith, the first half was absolutely dreadful. It was the worst. Geno Smith did not look good. The offense did not look good. But in the second half, Geno Smith came alive. It's like that Undertaker gif where he gets out of the coffin as the quarterback number 4. This is a great matchup for quarterbacks. Geno Smith is a competent enough quarterback to be able to have these big games, and he feels like a reliable top 16, top 18-ish option a majority of weeks. Now we move on into the 4th and final tier at the quarterback position, the high-end quarterback 2s, with Marcus Mariota, Matthew Stafford, Bryce Young, as well as Dak Prescott, quarterback 6. Last week for Marcus Mariota up against the Las Vegas Raiders defense. He's going up against a bottom 5 matchup for the quarterback position this week. He won't have Terry McLaurin, so there are many more holes in the offense compared to last week, and the matchup isn't the best. Mariota, though, when he played last year, when he had to start for Jaden Stormy Daniels, was very reliable for fantasy, so I'm not going to fully bury him. And again, I think the matchup is a little bit oversaturated up against the Falcons, or a little bit hyper kind of blown up due to the matchups that the Falcons have had through the first 3 weeks of the season. But again, without Terry McLaurin, I just am not as excited about Mariota. Still startable, though. Like, any of these guys are relatively startable, except for, like, Dak, who I think could always have a big game because they're going to be down up against the Packers, but I feel better about the other guys, if I'm being honest with you. Matthew Stafford going up against the Colts. Now, the biggest problem with Matthew Stafford really just is when you have zero mobility, unlike a guy like Marcus Mariota, who hit-sticked his coach Dan Quinn last week. Matthew Stafford has no rushing upside at this point. He needs to throw for 300 plus yards and 3 touchdowns to really have that top 12 day, but he's probably always going to finish in the range where he's still like a top 18, 20-ish guy, where if you started him, he's probably not the reason why you lost, but at this point in his career, he probably will never be the guy on your fantasy team as to why you actually won your league. Maybe you win a matchup or two strictly because he puts on that cape, shout out to Bruce Wayne, and has those big games, but I just don't really see it happening at a frequent basis. But if there ever was a game for Matthew Stafford to put on the cape, if there ever was a game for Matthew Stafford to put up belt-to-ass numbers, it would be up against the Indianapolis Colts in what is expected to be the highest scoring game on the slate. Next up, we got Bryce Young, the Little Tykes quarterback himself, who technically we've called that Kyler Murray as well, but the short king, Bryce Young, going up against the Patriots in New England. Last week was very weird because when you're up by so many points and the other offense just has no life, they show no signs of life, then you don't really have to throw the ball a ton, right? Bryce Young threw just 24 times up against the Falcons. He rushed in a touchdown, had 121 passing yards. You compare that to week number 2, up against the Cardinals, he threw 55 times. Week number 1, up against the Jaguars in Duval, 35 passing attempts. So the passing attempts should go up. The Patriots defense has not lived up to anyone's expectations this year. They were pretty heavily advertised as being this great defense, that Mike Vrabel football, baby, the Patriots defense, the Patriots offense, they're going to be fucking amazing, right? That everyone was basically just sucking on the metaphorical cock of the Patriots all summer long, like that Kid Rock song, and we haven't seen that pay off too much, but Bryce Young, I don't love it. I don't love what I've seen out of him so far, but down the stretch of last season, he looked great. He looked very good in the second half of week 2. Let's just hope he stops turning the ball over and keeps feeding Ted McMillan, and the big games will eventually come his way. Final guy in this tier, final quarterback we're to discuss is Dak Prescott. If you are in the deeper tiers at the quarterback position with like my next tier, tier 5 would be Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa, Carson Wentz, CJ Stroud, Michael Penix. Just ask down below in the comment section and we can talk about them down there. Dak Prescott, quarterback 17 last week up against the Bears. Wet dream matchup for Dak Prescott. CeeDee Lamb gets hurt. CeeDee Lamb will not be able to play in this game up against the Packers. He probably will miss multiple games. This is one of the hardest matchups for quarterbacks. But, and this is a big but, shout out to Lisa Ann, we know Dak Prescott is going to be trailing in this game. They're going to have to throw the ball a ton, so he may be able to backdoor himself in garbage time into a start-worthy finish. Now we move to the tight ends, headlined by the must-start tight ends, Brock Bowers, Jake Ferguson, Tucker Kraft, Mac and Cheese, as well as Tyler Warren. The number 1 tight end on the week was Trey McBride, but he already played, so we ain't going to be talking about him, just like we didn't talk about Kyler or Mono Man Sam in the quarterback section of the video. Now, Brock Bowers has been definitely a big letdown this season, right? Based upon where you had drafted him, you were expecting a reliable top 6 guy at minimum, week in and week out. He just hasn't been that. He is dealing with that knee injury that he suffered in week number 1, so maybe that's slowing him down a little bit, but he's still being targeted heavily, and just because he hasn't been as ideal over the last 2 weeks compared to week 1, you don't just turn your back on a tight end like Brock Bowers, especially in a top 12 matchup for tight ends. Next up, we got Jake Ferguson, Fergalicious, going up against the Green Bay Packers. Without CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson might be the number 1 target on this team for Dak Prescott. Back-to-back games with 12 or more targets, back-to-back top 3 finishes at the tight end position. I get we don't love the matchup up against the Packers because the Packers defense is solid, but up against tight ends, they are actually a top 8 matchup, so I do think this should end up being a solid day for Jake Ferguson, strictly because of the high amount of targets he should receive this week and until CeeDee Lamb comes back. Next up, we got Tucker Kraft going up against the Dallas Cowboys in Jerry's World, the Sunday Night Football matchup, the return of Micah Parsons to Dallas. What a narrative that will end up being now. Up against the Cowboys defense, this is a below average matchup for the tight end position. Tucker Kraft has been pretty hot and cold. Last week, we honestly thought maybe he would miss that game up against the Cleveland Browns because he got hurt in practice. People were worrying, and based upon the injury news that came out, it was like, holy fuck, is Tucker Kraft going to be put on IR? Comes out, he's not going to to be on IR, and then he plays. He's not super involved. Very weird game up against the Cleveland Browns, a game they obviously should have won, but didn't. Super low scoring game. This game, I think they put up much bigger numbers up against the Dallas Cowboys, so you got to rock with Tucker Kraft. Next up, we got Tyler Warren going up against the Los Angeles Rams in SoFi. Tyler Warren, top 7 tight end through the first 2 games. Last week, tight end 23. Shout out to Michael Jordan. This week, going up against the LA Rams defense. This is a middle of the road matchup for the tight end position. Tyler Warren is a safety blanket for Daniel Jones in this offense after just 1 bad game after 2 great games to start off his rookie season. No need to turn your head on him just like with Brock Bowers. Next up, we got the second tier here, the mid-range must-start tight ends with Hunter Henry and Juwan Johnson. There are a lot of people panicking about Hunter Henry after week number 2. There are people telling me, like, Nick, how could you possibly have Hunter Henry still ranked as a start? Nick, he had just 3 targets after having 8 targets in week 1. This is why you don't fucking panic in fantasy football, right? I get that I didn't have Hunter Henry ranked as the tight end 1, which is what he put up last week, right? 8 receptions on 11 targets for 90 yards and 2 touchdowns as the tight end number 1, 29 PPR points. Of course, I did not expect that, but Hunter Henry has been reliable throughout his career as a solid top 12-ish option. So after 1 down game, were we really going to call it quits on Hunter Henry? To me, it just didn't make very much sense. Up against the Panthers, this is a high-end matchup for the tight end position. Based on what we've seen out of Henry in 2 out of 3 games, you got to feel good about him. Next up, we got Juwan Johnson. Now, going up against the Buffalo Bills is a matchup that is bad for tight ends, but in my opinion, that's also one of those matchups that's a bit hyperinflated due to the tight ends that they have gone against. The New Orleans Saints just utilized Juwan Johnson so heavily that you just kind of have to start him. You already know that they're going to be getting their cheeks clapped by the Buffalo Bills, so they're going to be throwing a ton. Late in games, Juwan Johnson has had 8+ targets in every single game of the season, and he's been a top 9 tight end every single game and has 2 finishes with 16 fantasy points. The tight end position is incredibly shaky. The tight end position is very up and down, game in and game out. You never really feel great about a lot of the tight ends in fantasy football, but Juwan Johnson is one of those tight ends that you feel great about, so you need to credit him highly with the ranking. I don't understand why the expert consensus rankings have him as the tight end 11. Again, I get the matchup is bad, but he is far too heavily targeted to rank him lower than this. Next up, we got tier number 3, which is going to be the low-end tight end 1s with Dalton Kincaid, Sam Laporta, Mr. Swift, Travis Kelce, TJ Hawkinson, as well as Zach Ertz. Dalton Kincaid, tight end 4 in 2 of 3 games. The other game, he was the tight end 19. He scored a touchdown in both those games where he finished as the tight end number 4. Now, this is a team that's going to utilize 3 tight ends every single week. Jackson Hawes, they're going to use Dalton Kincaid, and they're going to use Dawson Knox one time if you are with me. Ultimately, the play when you play him feels a little bit nerve-wracking because he's just not in the game all the time, but Josh Allen does love targeting him near the end zone. So with the guy that's ran as hot as he did through the first 3 games of the season, and even when he had his down game, he still scored 8 fantasy points, so he didn't completely destroy your team. Feels like the kind of guy that needs to get more credit and be ranked higher. Next up, we got Sam Laporta going up against the Cleveland Browns. Sam Laporta was a guy that I told you guys to fade in fantasy drafts. I said that, hey, at ADP, I would rather just wait at the tight end position and draft one later. Maybe that led you to fading him and drafting David Njoku, and you got kicked in the testicles regardless. But at least you waited a couple rounds instead of where you drafted Sam Laporta. I have Laporta on one of my teams, and it doesn't feel great, but ultimately Sam Laporta is Sam Laporta, and no one would be shocked when this week comes to a close up against the Cleveland Browns. If Laporta had 2 touchdowns, would anyone be surprised? Not a single soul would be surprised if he did that. This is a middle-of-the-road matchup for the tight end position, and while I don't love what I've seen out of Laporta, he's still kind of just stuck in your lineup. At number 10, we got Travis Kelce going up against the Baltimore Ravens at home in Kansas City. In terms of matchup, this is a high-end matchup for tight ends. Kelce just kind of feels like he's on his quote-unquote retirement run this season, where he is never going to be really bad, but he's also never probably going to be that guy that you drafted Kelce and now you won your fucking league because of it, right? You just kind of play him. He's a top 10 guy. You get in, you get out. You're not super happy, but you're also not disappointed. Though this matchup, we might be able to see a vintage Travis Kelce. Next up, we got TJ Hawkinson going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh. Jordan Addison is back from his wet, reckless charge, his suspension for 3 games. So that throws a wrench into this offense. TJ Hawkinson looked back with Carson Wentz back into the lineup here. So we'll see what happens now with Jordan Addison. I like the spot up against the Steelers. Great matchup for tight ends. These games that are overseas typically don't end up being that exciting. They typically end up being kind of slop fest defensive battles, which might end up here with two defenses like the Vikings and the Steelers. So not very excited about Hawkinson, but again, after what he did last week, you kind of just have to put him in your lineup. Next up, we got Zach Ertz going up against the Atlanta Falcons in hot Atlanta. Not so hot last week with Mariota under center, but without Terry McLaurin, I do believe that the offense is going to just have to look more his way. Rough matchup for tight ends, the worst matchup for tight ends, but again, this is another matchup that is hyperinflated by the fact that the Falcons have been playing a bunch of defenses that don't, or a bunch of offenses that don't really utilize a tight end heavily. Now we move on into the fourth tier here, and this is where there starts to be a lot of concern, right? If you have someone in the first tier, you're feeling real great. In the second tier, you feel good. In the third tier, you feel pretty all right. You feel good-ish. Now, it's like, holy fuck, you're throwing shit against the wall and hoping it sticks. The high-end tight end twos, we got Mark Andrews, Kyle Pitts, Dallas Goedert, David Njoku, Harold Fannin, and Brenton Strange. Mark Andrews hopped in a time machine, hopped in the hot tub time machine, hopped into the DeLorean, and went back to a couple years ago, went back to the end of last season. He looked like a completely different man. Not one, but two tight ends, pause, 2 receptions, 2 targets, 91 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. 27 PPR points is the tight end number 2. Can he do it again? We shall see. Not gonna, bet a fortune on that. But if he is back, he'll probably be back in a big way and be much more reliable going forward. Next up, we got Kyle Pitts going up against the Washington Commanders. Last week, not very good out of Kyle Pitts due to the fact that the Atlanta Falcons got their clock cleaned by the Carolina Panthers. This week, we should be able to see somewhat of a bounce back, but based upon the fact that the Atlanta Falcons look as limp dick as they do, I don't think anyone in the right mind would be very confident in Kyle Pitts here, even with this being a top 10 matchup for tight ends. Next up, we got Dallas Goedert. Now, Dallas Goedert in week number 1 is like the best pass catching option on the Eagles. 7 of 7 for 44 yards. Last week, up against the LA Rams, he misses week number 2 due to injury. Things are looking bleak. It's looking bad. It's like, what the fuck? Where's Dallas Goedert? He's got 0 points. Then he makes his 1 reception on 2 targets for 33 yards and a touchdown. And you rely on a fucking Fugaz potential touchdown every week? Probably not. But when you're on an offense like the Eagles and you're playing up against the Bucs in what could be a higher scoring game, if hopefully the offensive line locks into the Buccaneers, you could see Dallas Goedert have that touchdown again that takes him over the top. Next up, we got David Njoku. Now, David Njoku has just not lived up to expectations at all thus far this season. He's another one of these guys where it's like, you can't really cut him, but you also are sitting there on Sunday like, can he score more than 8 points, right? Because he scored 7, 8, and 9 points through the first 3 games of the season. So based upon that pattern, 7 in week 1, 8 in week 2, 9 in week 3. Hopefully he gets 10 this week. Again, you're not really feeling that great about it, though. Next up, we got Harold Fannin going up against the Detroit Lions, same exact team, where we have seen the points be an uptick for Njoku. Harold Fannin has went in the opposite direction. Tight end 6, tight end 12, then the tight end number 30. I hope that eventually we start to see a different quarterback in Cleveland because I think Fannin is good enough to be a high-end option. The problem is kind of just the offense as a whole. Final guy in this tier is going to be Brenton Strange going up against the San Francisco 49ers in Santa Clara. In terms of a matchup, this is a top 12 matchup for tight ends. Brenton Strange, 4 targets, 5 targets, then 7 targets. If he's able to get 6+ targets every single week, even with the Jacksonville Jaguars offense not being very good at all, I would be comfortable starting Brenton Strange in this range. He hasn't earned enough, metaphorical coach trust. You play the NCAA football video game where you get coach trust. He doesn't earn enough of my coach trust yet to rank him any higher. Final tier here is going to be tier number 5, the low-end tight end number 2s. Chig, Cade Otton, and Jonnu Smith. The hope now with Chig would be that the offense just gives him his 6-ish targets, and hopefully Cam Ward plays good enough, but up against the Texans defense, it's just not good enough. Cade Otton, no Mike Evans, 0 points in 2 out of 3 games. Prayer. Like, these guys are just prayer plays. Janu Smith, my tight end number 20 in these rankings. Technically, my tight end 21. Questionable on Sunday, dealing with the hip injury. He has looked good when given the ball, but he's not given the ball enough. They use Freiermuth and him way too frequently to really consider him as start worthy. But if you need a dart throw, he is in this range. Thank you guys all so much for watching. If you did end up enjoying today's video, please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, make sure you leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. Check out one of the videos on the screen if you haven't seen them already. We'll be live Sunday morning at around 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time at minimum. Might go live 10 a.m. Love you guys so much. Hope you have a great one. As always, good boy.